Hey everyone, how's it going? So, emulation. Now, emulation is kind of a weird subject, you know? Whenever I look at the topic, it's usually real hardware versus emulation, emulation versus real hardware, you know? It's kind of like a back and forth thing. But, me personally, I feel like there could be a perfect balance, like, with that. Now, I want to say, like, me personally, I just figured out how to get emulators running on my Xbox Series S, my iPhone, my iPad, and it emulation is fucking dope. And don't get me wrong, right? I've been collecting for like, I don't know, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, right? I still own original hardware. I own all the basic consoles. And I'm not throwing them out. But I I feel like emulation offers a sense of freedom that real hardware like doesn't have, right? So to preface this, the most amount of money I'm willing to spend on the video game is $300, and that's fucking pushing it, right? With emulation, I could literally play anything. Little Samson, Keyboard, Chibi Robo, Go Go Hyper Grind, Illbleed for the Dreamcast, I don't know, Parasite Eve, Tamba, so on and so forth. And meaning again, while I do love real hardware, it's kind of nice not having to worry about prices sometimes. Either way, though, the simulation shit is fucking dope, dude. Like, I could have thousands of games at the palm of my fucking hand, right? And, like, here's the thing. Here's one thing that emulation offers that retro gaming doesn't really have. Like let's just say if I buy Chibi Robo, when I play it, it's gonna be on my mind like, shit, I really just spent $200 on the GameCube game. But if I get on emulation, I'm just like fully embraced, in the game. I'm not necessarily worried about price. I'm not necessarily, like worried about the value or if it's complete in the box. And while I do love that stuff, let's just, admit it, retro gaming is a somewhat expensive hobby. And here's a perfect example of that. I remember, I think sometime last year, I bought like F-Zero GX for the GameCube. And that was the game I wanted for like a very, very long time. But even with F-Zero GX being such like a great game, there's still that cost factor that came up in the back of my mind, like on the surface I'm like, yeah, this game is fun, but then in the back of my head it's just like, really, you spent $80 on this on a GameCube game? And I know that's a weird way to think about it, but like, when you think of games physically, you kind of gotta think about this sometimes. I have to say that I'm like a stickler for game prices. Like, I don't really care about the value. It's just like, if I'm spending like over $100 for a game, I really need to know if I'm like really gonna like it or not.
Customize your own machine and race through 20 gravity-defying courses at ridiculous speeds. F-Zero GX. The future of racing is in your hands. Only for Nintendo GameCube. Rated T for Teen. GameCube.
Now, one thing I do want to say is that emulation isn't really like the end-all be-all. I mean, of course, by the screenshots you can tell, like, it definitely has its issues. Like with most emulators, you can't do the mirror thing on Mario Kart 64, or like with more demanding games like Conker's Bad Fur Day, you can see like Conker looks, a little fucked up. But in this case, with Conker, I'm willing to give it like a little bit of leeway because I do not feel like spending that much money for the real cartridge. But you see what I'm saying. Now, the one thing I kind of want to point out is the different ways people enjoy emulation. You can play it on PC, laptop, phone, iPad, whatever. I kind of figured out a way to do it in like a really cool way. So like, I have like a few CRTs, obviously they're for retro gaming and like VHS tapes. But I figure if I'm running like, emulators on Xbox Series S, why not put them on the CRT? And like, believe it or not, they still look really fucking good. Like as if it's like the real thing. I mean, obviously, it's like a CRT, but like, I see like a huge opportunity in this because, like, again, I love retro gaming, but like the fact I could run any console and run it on a CRT and it still looks fucking good, like I'm down with that, And like, even if it has like small flaws like Mario Kart 64, Conker's Bad Fur Day, if it looks good on the CRT TV, like I'm okay with that. And I'm not saying like throw out your monitor or iPad or whatever, but if you're into collecting video games, you may or may not have some CRTs around. And all I'm saying is if you have them, put up an emulator and that's just gonna look fucking good. And like the main reason why I emphasize this is like emulators allow me to play games that I'm probably never gonna play. You know, like Sonic CD. I'm a big fan of Sonic, but I'm not gonna spend $200, $300, $400 on a Sega CD. And I feel like, emulation is like the quickest way to enjoy that. And also, like, not to be a boomer, but like, I feel like this is a great way for like younger people who didn't grow up in like the 90s or the 2000s to experience like great games like this, Like Sega Genesis, Super Nintendo, those consoles were way before my time. I was born in 97. And the only way I got to experience those consoles were through, Sonic Mega Collection, or I don't know, the NES games on Animal Crossing, so on and so forth. The only reason why I know those games is because of, back-end titles like that. And I feel like emulation is a good way for like, young people to experience games from like the 2000s, 90s, and 80s, Like, here's a good example, right? I really want to get a Sega Master System, like the real thing. But the only reason why I don't get it is because like there's only like 12 or 13 games I actually want to play on it, So why waste almost $200 buying the real thing when I could just like boot up an emulator and just play whatever? Like TurboGrafx 16, there's only one game I want to play on it, and that's Bonk's Adventure. Or like 3DO, where I could experience Hotel Mario.
You know what they say, all toasters toast.
Or the infamous Zelda series.
Lamp oil, ropes, bombs. You want it? It's yours, my friend, as long as you have enough rubies.
Now, I want to bring on a friend of mine who's the perfect example of a young person experiencing games for the first time through emulation. Vinny, take it away.
Hello, everyone. It's been a minute, huh? Emulation is something I feel I have a special relationship with, and I hope I can add to this discourse we're having on this subject. I'm not sure how many people watching this will relate to my story, but if you were born after the GameCube, you'll probably understand where I'm coming from. While the GameCube is technically older than me, I still remember growing up on it at friends' houses and parties I went to. As I've said it in a previous video, the first console our household ever got was a Wii. And while my family never figured out how to connect it to the internet, the virtual console inside of Smash Bros. Brawl was my first taste of emulation and retro gaming. There I remember trying to maximize the most out of those 5 minutes that each demo gave me. Some of my most notable achievements through this Smash Bros. Brawl emulation was reaching the underwater level of the original Mario Bros. Through warp pipes, speedrunning the opening area of Ocarina of Time and getting as far as the opening cutscene with the Deku Tree, and also finding the secret route through the overhangs in Corneria in the opening level of Star Fox 64. In Brawl, this was my first real taste of retro titles, and I remember specifically playing Ice Climbers and thinking of how brilliant it was that you went up instead of side to side. I think that also goes to show that to a kid, if a game has a good idea and it's executed well, they're gonna find it fun. Years later, my next taste of retro gaming would come through a shitty MacBook. Through most of my childhood, whenever I was playing video games, my dad would laugh at our Mario Karts and Wii Sports, and talk about how back in his day, he would play a game where you kicked people off of motorcycles. Thinking that that was essentially the only video game my old man played, I really wanted to find it. And hey, kicking people off a motorcycle sounds fun. That led me on a search to find what turned out to be Road Rash for the Sega Genesis. I found it on some now defunct website, downloaded it, and tried to run it with the first software I could find. That software ended up being OpenEMU. Little did I know that what I had just started would spiral into an obsession of mine. You see, OpenEMU could run the Genesis games, but it also ran SNES, NES, and Game Boy games. But most importantly, it introduced me to the Nintendo 64 in a much broader way than Brawl ever could. The first game I tried was the one that hooked me back in Brawl. And let me tell you, loading up Ocarina of Time for the first time was magical. And to think that I was playing it on a keyboard and enjoying it. If Brawl was my first taste at retro gaming, going through the Nintendo 64 library on that Mac was a point of no return. I would later emulate games I watched YouTubers play like Kirby's Dream Course, Super Metroid, Castlevania, Pilot Wings was awesome, the original Mario Kart, Yoshi's Island, fucking Gex. I would migrate from computer to computer throughout all of my years in school, through middle school, high school, and college. But my emulation folder, which I like to call the Soulja Boy console, is usually the first transfer I make. My story is a testament to why I view emulation as a necessity for the longevity of gaming as a whole. Most of these games fall into a category of abandonware. Many of these consoles are home to franchises that haven't been released in decades. Going back to the physical hardware, while I played Brawl at home, I would play Melee at my friends' houses and church youth groups. Can I talk about Melee? Can I? Nintendo, am I allowed to talk about Melee? Fuck, I'm talking about Melee. If Emulation did not exist, Melee would probably still survive because those people are maniacs. However, the continued new talent and exposure it receives through projects like Slippy makes me so happy. Because first of all, it increases the lifespan of Melee, and it also makes Nintendo shit the bed every time someone breaks a record or dethrones a god. If you know, you know. I guess what I'm trying to say is that regardless of what the console or franchise, Emulation prolongs the exposure and lifespan a game receives than if it was simply left to rot on whatever disc or cartridge it was originally sold on. It's simple as that. Now, some people may say that I pirated and stole games as a child with no money, and I feel that way of thinking misses the point. My first question to that person is, do you really think that the only moral way to play games is through the original forms and original hardware? That's fucking wacky, dude. The most commonly emulated games haven't been offered in over 20 years. So good luck trying to play the original copy of Seaman on the Dreamcast. What about 3DS and Wii U remakes of all those original N64 games? Well, first off, it's 2024 now. Those consoles aren't even being sold anymore. And they lost their online support a couple months ago. And those games completely changed the look and feel of how the originals played. What about Nintendo Online or retro bundles? Well, the fact is, when classic titles are re-released on official emulators, that shit sucks. These companies have no motivating factors to ensure quality and functionality for these games. They view them as what they are, essentially, as just cash cows. When compared to the passion projects from unemployed college kids that are just trying to prolong the lifespan of their favorite games, the official options are overpriced and insulting. When compared to their fan-made alternatives, that the fans released for free, by the way, because of the lawsuits, it's amazing that there are even emulators we can even talk about in the first place. I'm also of the mindset that if an official emulator is only being offered through a subscription, then that means that you don't actually own it. And at the moment that that support goes away, like we've seen with the Wii and the Wii U, then it's gone forever. If the only official way for me to play Earthbound is through a subscription service, and I decide to emulate it, then am I really stealing it by the time that they decide to take down the service? Honestly, I think Nintendo fans deserve a pass after owning a Switch, buying the overpriced and unfinished Pokemon games, and paying for shitty online services every single month. These benefits I'm talking about, as well as my own story, I think way outweigh the costs incurred by a corporation that isn't even offering these games in the first place anymore, so there is no cost, that seeks to ban fans from playing games they own, and prohibit third-party controllers that allow individuals with disabilities to play their games in the first place. If you can't tell already, I'm still blown away by the fact that that's something we're dealing with in the competitive scene. I can also confidently say that without emulation, I would not have the knowledge, the interest, and the passion for games that I have today. I didn't run off of my emulated game files either. As I record this, I am looking at a Nintendo 64 that is on my desk, proudly flipping off Nintendo. No doubt this is because of that early childhood experience I had through Nintendo's very own Virtual Console back on the Wii. As the gaming industry changes today, there's a new respect that I have for how things used to be. Knowing that the humble collection of N64 cartridges that I own can't be taken away retroactively through services and subscriptions is huge. Ocarina of Time is the most impactful game I've ever played. It's by far my favorite game. And without the emulation I experienced on Brawl, I may never have experienced the game in the first place. I guess what I'm trying to say is that by emulating Ocarina of Time through ROMs and downloads, I now have the privilege of holding my own physical copy right now in my hands, and playing it through a real physical Nintendo 64 on the real physical crappy joystick. And that's really special. People who feel that emulation should be eradicated entirely strip the abilities for new people to experience these types of games. So that's my 2 cents, and I hope that you enjoy. Let's get back to the video.
And it's goal! Another goal for Michael Good of Australia! Goal! Goal! Goal!
Michael, what's next?
I want to go with my Nintendo 64. I've been 49.1, but I know I can do better.
First place, 48.04. That's a new record. Miss Clinton has success coming across.
I wanted gold at any cost.
Nintendo 64 with limited edition gold controller, just $199.
I feel like Vinny brings up a really, really good point. It kind of emphasizes what I said before with, like young people getting into retro gaming. Like he got into retro games through Smash. I got into it through Animal Crossing and Sonic Mega Collection. Overall, though, I do kind of get, emulation has its ups and downs, but I do concretely believe that emulation has, a purpose. Like, I'm pretty sure there's still tons of beta N64 and GameCube cartridges and discs, and those kind of need to be, like, preserved. Or, like, I don't know. There's a bunch of more examples I could use. I think you get the point, but either way, ladies and gents, if you want to, like, subscribe, do whatever you want to do, no rush, and tell me down below, what's your favorite Nintendo game? Peace.
E tutte le cotto sempre da chete.
no!
Popcorn.